what I will talk about is the Spring Summer 25 show, um, which was actually really, really cool, really, really interesting. I put the show notes on the screen here. Essentially, what she talks about in the show notes is this idea of, challenging the idea of beauty and where we find beauty in the body and our ideas of where we find beauty. So one of the phrases that stood out to me in the show notes where she said she was creating a tension between mass market and niche beauty, which is very interesting because I remember on when the show happened, a lot of people were asking why people had those like weird noses, like why they had those massive noses. And in an interview, Martine Rose said that the first thing that you see when you look at people sometimes is their nose. And it's also something that people change about themselves. It's almost like the first thing that people change about themselves. So that's why she put a nose there, because she knew that it would be something that would make people feel uneasy, but also like look there. And it's also makes you think about like different beauty standards and like what nose is beautiful, or like what's the beauty standard as far as a nose. And there are also other elements in this show that were kind of made for people to kind of be a bit confused. She said in her interview with Vogue that she wanted the collection to look a bit messy and go against the expectations of what you would, think of a show in Milan. That's why, let me bring the video back slightly actually, because it's a very important detail to look at. That's why the lighting in the show is really odd. Like some parts are lit and then other parts aren't. It's not like the normal runway show where they lit things evenly because they want the video after to look really chic and the lighting has to be on point. She's just got lights going all over the place. So you might see the details clearer, or you might not. It just depends where you're sitting. And that adds to part of the chaos. This collection actually reminded me of that old Martine Rose collection, the one that had a very similar tailoring aesthetic with the ties and the really, really wide trousers. I'm trying to remember what season it was. But this collection really, really reminded me of that. Train spotting had to have informed her perspective a lot. Oh my God, I can see that actually. That's a good spot. I can actually see that. That's a really good spot. Always love her collections. Of course, when we talk about Martine Rose, and I know earlier someone was saying in terms of when I was asking who should win and someone said Martine Rose, they were saying that because Martine Rose's aesthetic has kind of been used and abused across the industry. And I totally agree in that sense, that her aesthetic and her silhouette that she's been building over the years has been adopted by a lot of different designers. Even like this is a very interesting, where we know that Martine Rose has very boxy tailoring, but she's mixing boxy tailoring with very small lapels. Normally, when people have this really boxy tailoring, they normally have larger lapels than this. So she's like playing with different elements even within her tailoring, right? But yeah, aesthetically similar to what we've known from Martine, the boxy tailoring, the square toe loafers. At this point, I think it's kind of like a uniform wardrobe. She also has these kind of very witty takes on sportswear, which I absolutely love. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about, by the way, because I know that sometimes I talk about these things in general terms because I just assume that people know what I'm talking about. But because I'm a big sports fan, so when she has these like witty inspirations, I can see it immediately. Like a good example is from her Fall Winter 24 collection. Now, for football fans know about this moment. This is Balotelli, Why Always Me. This was when Manchester City were in the Manchester derby. They were playing against Manchester United. Balotelli scored. He lifted up his shirt that said, "Why always me?" Now, this is one of the most iconic celebrations in football. Reason being, Balotelli used to get into so much trouble. For as good as a football player he was, he always used to find his way into the tabloids. He's either crashing his car, or he turns up to training late, or he turns up to training drunk, or he's been clubbing all night and he gets into a fight. You know, there's always an issue with with Mario Balotelli. There was always an issue back then when he was playing for Manchester City, and the British football media is harsh. They will, if they find the tiniest thing they can criticize you for, they will critique the life out of you. And so this moment when he lifted up his shirt after scoring and say, you know, why always me? It's just iconic because if you have the context of how just like insane this guy was, like Mario Balotelli, it's funny. And so Martine Rose will make a football jersey, but then she will make like something like this, where this is called the Celebration Football Top. And maybe I have to get this up on her website, but it also has a back panel so you can lift it up and you can mimic that gesture of Mario Balotelli lifting up his shirt over his head when he did the why always me. And so Martine Rose has these little like design cues in her work, across her work, where the tailoring at first looks simple, but then you see the patterns and then you see where the references are coming from. I want to see if I can go on her website if she has that jersey so that we can see the panel that I'm talking about. Just so I can show you guys the back panel. Someone said he's the Dennis Rodman of football. Kind of. Although I feel like Balotelli was more polarizing than Dennis Rodman because Balotelli really used to get into that much trouble. Like, Balotelli was a nuisance. Balotelli was literally a nuisance. So like, this is stuff like this. So that's the thing with Martine Rose. Martine Rose the reason she makes football jerseys is because, as I've spoken many times on this channel, Martine Rose is inspired by like her own nostalgia growing up. It's her sister dressing up a certain way and going to, garage dances that she couldn't go to and how people used to dress back then. And it's looking at, the business casual workwear and also the business casual suits that people used to wear going to work in the 90s. And it's also the sportswear that people would wear going to raves in London and how that sportswear would look, which is why if you just look at the font of the sportswear that she's using, it's very much like, it reminds me of like an Umbro font, like the Umbro, like when England jersey used to be made by Umbro. It's kind of like a very similar font, but then she has obviously the detailing. Also the collar looks like that really thick collar looks very similar to the old football jerseys. So stuff like that. So why I always love Martine Rose's work is I just see her work and I see where the references come from, and they're so witty and funny and interesting. And I love a designer that, has a sense of humor, but also in her own merit, she has these silhouettes and a certain tailoring aesthetic that people use also. And she also has this like, because her work is so referential to her own experience and what she saw growing up, there are also these ideas of like family. Like even this piece that you're looking at on the screen, this is a piece full of portraits of just friends and family, for example. And there's always like this homely vibe within Martine Rose's work. Greenhead said Martine is too Londoner. Cornbow, I totally agree, where Cornbow says she pays attention to culture and informs her audience by manipulating the mundane. I totally agree with that. Someone said it reminds me of Diesel. I mean, Martine Rose has been doing this kind of stuff before, like this new school Y2K sort of Glenn Martin's Diesel aesthetic. Like Martine Rose has been doing that forever. But yeah, I can see why people would say you can see some Diesel there. I get that. Yeah, Cornbow is saying subcultural fashion. Also, I find it interesting that even down to like the color palette and like panels and stuff, because obviously Inter Milan has like a stripy jersey, but it's like black and blue. And Martine Rose has made her own kind of like Inter Milan play top, where she's kind of like using the same panels but in different colors. Oh, Rugob says, I mean 90s diesel, I'm old. Being old is a good thing. I'm jealous of people that are a lot older than me because they got to live through a time period of fashion that I wasn't born in, and so I have to like ask people and live through them, or I just have to go to museums. That's why I'm always going to museums, because I just have to see the stuff up close, especially clothing or like documentaries or whatever. So being old is a good thing. She recognizes that Inter Milan is the coolest shirt. Fact. I have an Inter Milan jersey and I'm not even an Inter Milan fan. I just like the way it looks. I went on a tangent in terms of the football jersey and stuff, but like, once again, the actual main point of this collection was challenging beauty standards. So for example, you have a dress like this where you can see like the bra detailing on the dress is like mad oversized, and it almost forces you to like look at the breast area. Once again, talking about like an area, the boobs, where a lot of people do plastic surgery and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just one of those things where she's using her clothing also to push your eye to certain parts of the body to get you to think about, beauty standards and like the way we sexualize things. It's the same reason why you see the leather panels at the crotch and all those kind of things. Like even now, if she doesn't have the leather panel at the crotch, now she has this zip detailing around the groin area, which I really like. But yeah, I just love Martine Rose because she has a way, because you look at her clothing and a lot of it is like weird and then a lot of it is commercial. I think it's weird in a fun, witty, interesting way. But she has a way of making commercial clothing fun, which I think a lot of designers struggle to do. And she has a sense of humor, like I said earlier, with her clothing that a lot of designers struggle with. So that's what I really, really, really appreciate about Martine Rose's work. So yeah, I'm definitely a fan. I would say I'm a fan of everyone in the category of this menswear thing. So it's really fun just going through their work and just, like seeing it and talking about it. I always love a time to talk about Martine Rose's work because I'm always obsessed. But that being said, I think that Martine Rose is very good at world building. She's good at her cultural commentary through clothing. And yeah, I just think she's witty. And it's not just the clothing, it's the marketing campaigns, it's the way things are branded, it's where her stuff is shown. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club, where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.